A young American airman named Louis Zamperini floated on a torn life raft, sunburned, starving, barely conscious. Days earlier, his B-24 Liberator had vanished over open water. Engines failing, radio dead, crew scattered. Now the war felt personal, intimate, reduced to thirst, pain, and memory. Zamperini clenched his jaw, whispered prayers, and stared at the sky, refusing despair. Around him, the Pacific theater raged, island by island, empire against empire. Brutality without pause. Japan and the United States fought across oceans, jungles and skies for control and survival. For Zamperini, an Olympic runner turned bombardier, the global war narrowed to a fragile raft. Sharks circled beneath him, wings slicing water, hunger driving them closer each night. Japanese planes strafed the raft, bullets tearing canvas, fate missing by inches. Still he lived, day after day, drifting farther from rescue, closer to capture. On the 47th day, land appeared jagged, hostile, unavoidable. Japanese patrol boats cut through the water, rifles raised, voices sharp. Zamperini did not fight, he could not run. His body was finished. Hands bound him, lifted him, dragged him from sunlight into shadow. He was no longer a lost airman, but a prisoner of war. Across the world in 1943, POW camps filled with men like him, broken by design. The Japanese military doctrine despised surrender, and mercy was not policy. Zamperini sensed it immediately, in the blows, the laughter, the silence between orders. This was only the beginning, not of captivity alone, but of endurance. The enemy would try to erase his name, his will, his humanity. What they did not know on that moment at sea was this: Louis Zamperini would not break, not today, not ever. On 26 April 1943, Louis Zamperini was transported under guard, blindfolded, weakened, silent. The boat cut toward Kwajalein Atoll, a place prisoners whispered about, never survived. Japanese guards struck without warning, enforcing obedience through pain. Zamperini counted blows, breathed through blood, refused to scream. Kwajalein was not a camp, it was an execution ground, hidden from the world. American prisoners arrived there to disappear, officially never recorded. Zamperini was beaten upon arrival, ribs bruised, spirit tested immediately. Interrogators demanded names, missions, weaknesses, searching for cracks. They knew he was an Olympian, a symbol, something to be broken publicly. Zamperini answered carefully, gave nothing, protected others. Hunger gnawed constantly, food measured in spoonfuls, strength fading daily. Guards used fists, sticks, humiliation, all designed to erase identity. Each night, Zamperini replayed races in his mind, pacing imaginary tracks. He remembered Berlin, 1936, crowds roaring, purpose alive. That memory became armor, invisible but unyielding. The war outside continued relentlessly. Midway behind them, Guadalcanal contested. Inside the camp, time lost meaning. Days blurred into endurance. Prisoners vanished, taken away, never returning. Zamperini understood survival required silence, defiance hidden deep. After weeks, unexpectedly, he was moved again. A transport plane carried him north, deeper into the empire. His survival at Kwajalein was an anomaly, a mistake perhaps. But suffering did not lessen, it intensified. Japan needed propaganda, not corpses, and Zamperini fit their need. The enemy had captured his body, but not his resolve. Ahead waited harsher camps, crueler guards, systematic breaking. This was not escape, only escalation. And Louis Zamperini prepared himself for a longer fight.
On the WWII, August of 1943, Louis Zamperini arrived in Yokohama. Bruised, underfed, unbowed. The transport doors opened to shouting guards, barking orders, and public humiliation. Japanese civilians stared, some curious, some silent, as prisoners marched past. Zamperini was sent to Ofuna camp, a secret interrogation center, erased from Red Cross lists. This was a place for breaking men, not holding them. Guards isolated prisoners, denied mail, denied names, denied existence. Zamperini's Olympic fame followed him, making him a target. Interrogators demanded radio addresses, invasion plans, propaganda cooperation. When he refused, punishment escalated. He was beaten for standing straight, beaten for looking away, beaten for breathing wrong. Food rations shrank, disease spread, strength drained daily. Still, Zamperini refused to bow his head. He remembered his brother's voice. Childhood runs, promise never to quit. Those memories became fuel, keeping his spirit upright. Other prisoners watched him, drew courage from his quiet resistance. In 1944, as Allied bombing intensified, guards grew crueler. Defeat loomed for Japan and rage replaced discipline. Zamperini was transferred again, this time to a Mori prison camp. There he met Mutsuhiro Watanabe, later known as the Bird. Watanabe targeted Zamperini relentlessly, obsessed with breaking him. Beatings became personal, theatrical, frequent. Prisoners were forced to strike Zamperini, one by one. Blood fell onto dirt, humiliation layered upon pain. Yet Zamperini stood, trembling, refusing collapse. The Bird screamed, frustrated, unfulfilled. War news leaked in fragments, islands falling, skies burning. Hope whispered through camps, dangerous but alive. Zamperini understood this truth clearly. The war would end someday. The question was whether he would endure until then. Each morning he chose resistance, quietly, deliberately. Because surrender, even internal, meant death.
On Thrace, June 1944, a Mori prison camp tightened like a fist. As Japan's war fortunes darkened, Louis Zamperini woke before dawn, ribs aching, stomach hollow, eyes already watched. The Bird ruled the camp through terror, obsession, and unpredictable cruelty. Each morning roll call became a trial, delays punished, mistakes invented. Zamperini stood straight, chin lifted, knowing defiance invited pain. Watanabe noticed everything: posture, breath, silence, confidence. Beatings came daily now, fists and clubs, calculated and public. The Bird wanted submission, not death, a broken symbol. Prisoners were forced again to strike Zamperini, hands shaking, faces ashamed. Each blow landed heavier on the soul than the body. Zamperini absorbed it all, swaying, refusing to fall. At night, he lay awake, counting heartbeats, replaying races, clinging to control. Food grew scarcer, rice mixed with sawdust, strength fading steadily. Disease spread through barracks, dysentery, beriberi, despair. Outside the camp, Allied bombers thundered overhead, shaking walls, rattling fear. Guards grew harsher, anger replacing order, violence replacing rules. Japan was losing ground, island by island, sky by sky. Inside Omori, prisoners sensed change, dangerous but hopeful. Zamperini whispered encouragement, shared scraps, protected weaker men. The Bird responded with isolation, confinement, threats of execution. On the 18th of July 1944, Zamperini was singled out again. He was ordered to lift a heavy beam, arms trembling, knees buckling. Failure meant death, success meant punishment later. Zamperini lifted, muscles tearing, vision blurring, crowd silent. Watanabe watched closely, waiting for collapse. Minutes stretched, sweat fell, breath burned. Zamperini did not drop the beam. The Bird screamed, struck him repeatedly, humiliated by resistance. That moment spread quietly through the camp, courage contagious. Zamperini understood now. Survival was rebellion. Every day endured, denied the enemy victory. The war pressed closer, time narrowing, choices shrinking. And Louis Zamperini held on, knowing the end would come. On 20 August 1944, Louis Zamperini was moved again, thinner, slower, unbroken. Omori fell behind as trains carried prisoners north, deeper into Japan. The destination was Naoetsu Camp, infamous for cold, labor, cruelty. Winter approached, and hope grew fragile. Zamperini arrived to frozen ground, harsh winds, and immediate violence. Mutsuhiro Watanabe followed him there, obsession renewed, punishment personal. Each day began before sunrise, prisoners forced into coal yards. They lifted, carried, collapsed, rose again, watched constantly. Zamperini's body weakened, weight dropping, bones visible, strength fading. Still his will hardened, sharpened by suffering. Gods beat prisoners for falling, for slowing, for nothing. Food barely sustained life, rice measured, soup thin. Zamperini shared when he could, risking punishment. The bird targeted generosity, cruelty increasing. Beatings became ritual, predictable yet relentless. Snow fell heavy, covering suffering in silence. Prisoners whispered of American advances, of bombing raids, of nearing defeat. Hope flickered, dangerous but unstoppable. Zamperini clung to routine, to memory, to dignity. He refused to beg, refused to bow. In September 1944, exhaustion nearly ended him. Collapsed during labor, he was beaten unconscious. Thrown into a cell, he hovered between life and death. Yet he survived, stubborn, resilient. The camp sensed his endurance. Morale lifted quietly. The bird sensed it too, rage deepening. Every failed attempt to break Zamperini strengthened him. The war outside Japan worsened, cities burned, skies filled with bombers. Inside Nawetsu, cruelty spiked as fear grew. Zamperini understood. The enemy was desperate. Desperation made them dangerous, but also careless. Winter closed in, brutal and long. And still, Louis Zamperini endured, one breath, one step, one day at a time. On 10th December 1944, winter crushed Nawetsu camp under ice and hunger. Louis Zamperini woke each morning stiff, bruised, barely warm. Snow piled against barracks, wind cut through thin clothing, breath burned lungs. Labor continued regardless, coal dust mixing with frost. Prisoners slipped, fell, were beaten for bleeding. Zamperini's hands cracked, bled, numbed completely. The bird arrived unpredictably, violence trailing his presence. Each visit meant new punishments, new humiliations. Zamperini learned to read his mood, to brace for impact. Still, he refused submission, standing tall when ordered. Guards sensed the war turning. Allied bombers roared overhead. Air raid sirens wailed. Fear replaced confidence. Food rations shrank again. Survival calculated by crumbs. Disease claimed men quietly, bodies removed without ceremony. Zamperini memorized faces, promised to remember names. At night, prisoners shared dreams of home, voices low. Those moments kept humanity alive. In January 1945, news leaked through whispers. The Philippines were falling. Okinawa loomed. Japan's empire was cracking. Beatings intensified, rage uncontrolled. On Vestus, February 1945, Zamperini was forced to stand in snow for hours. His legs shook, vision tunneled, body screamed. Collapse meant death. He focused on breathing, on endurance, on refusing. The bird watched, waiting. Zamperini did not fall. That defiance cost him days of punishment. Yet something shifted in the guards. Fear crept in, authority weakening. By March 1945, bombing raids shook the region nightly. Cities burned beyond the fences. Zamperini felt the war nearing its end. Hope returned, cautious, fragile. Still he endured, knowing liberation could come suddenly, or too late. Every sunrise remained uncertain. On 15 April 1945, the air over Nawetsu felt different, heavy, expectant. Louis Zamperini sensed change before words arrived, before proof appeared. Bombers passed overhead more often now, engines droning like distant thunder. Guards no longer shouted with certainty, discipline frayed, fear visible. The bird appeared less frequently, his authority slipping, his rage unfocused. Prisoners noticed it, quietly, carefully, sharing looks, not words. Zamperini moved slower now, body worn thin, but mind alert. Each day remained dangerous. Desperation made cruelty unpredictable. Food shortages worsened. Guards stealing rations, prisoners shrinking. Yet rumors spread. Hiroshima whispered, Tokyo burning, empire failing. On dresses, May 1945, Zamperini was beaten without reason. A final assertion of power. He absorbed it, tasting blood, refusing reaction. The bird screamed, unsatisfied, unable to provoke collapse. That imbalance terrified him. Outside the camp, the war raced toward conclusion. Inside, time stretched painfully. Zamperini marked days by sunrise, by pain cycles, by survival. He thought of home, of California, of running free. He promised himself he would return, no matter the cost. On date May 1945, Germany surrendered in Europe. The guards heard radio fragments, confusion spreading fast. Prisoners dared to hope, cautiously, dangerously. Japan stood alone now, cornered, bleeding. Violence spiked briefly, then stalled. Orders became inconsistent, discipline fractured. Zamperini noticed guards avoiding eye contact. Authority was dissolving. By July 1945, bombing raids intensified dramatically. Cities vanished overnight, smoke visible from campgrounds. On 6th and August 1945, a single explosion changed the war forever. Prisoners did not yet know its name, only its impact. Days later, another strike followed. Silence fell across Naoetsu. Then on 15th and August 1945, Japan surrendered. Guards vanished, fled or hid. Gates stood unlocked. Zamperini stepped outside, weak, free, alive. The enemy had failed. His spirit remained intact. By the spring of 1945, the war in Europe had entered its final, chaotic phase, yet for James Lawson, captivity offered no respite, only a different kind of battle. In the dim confines of the German camp, 12th April 1945, he studied every guard, every routine, every weakness, committing it to memory with the focus of a man whose life depended on it. Outside, the world was shifting. Allied forces pressed from the west. The Soviets from the east, cities fell, and the Reich trembled under relentless pressure. But inside the camp, time slowed, each day measured in fear, calculation, and the quiet endurance of a solitary prisoner. Lawson kept his hands steady, his eyes calm, hiding the storm within. He spoke little, shared nothing, knowing that silence could be a shield more powerful than any barricade. Letters smuggled in by sympathetic locals told of cities liberated, fronts collapsing, and the inevitability of German defeat, feeding his hope, but also sharpening the urgency of escape. Every night he traced the shadows of the guards with precise mental maps, rehearsing potential moves, knowing that the right choice, the perfect moment, could turn captivity into freedom. He thought of his comrades of Normandy, of the frozen fields of Belgium, of faces lost to war, and drew strength from their memory, refusing to bend, refusing to break. By 20th April 1945, whispers of approaching Allied units filtered through the camp, a spark of opportunity igniting in Lawson's mind. Every decision now held the weight of life, history, and the fragile thread separating survival from oblivion. This was no longer simply about resisting captivity, it was about reclaiming agency, asserting courage in the face of overwhelming odds, and proving that even in chains, a single man could influence the course of fate. As night fell, Lawson prepared quietly, each movement deliberate, the world outside drawing closer, the moment for defiance approaching, and the prisoner inside ready to become more than a victim. By 25th April 1945, the Allied forces were closing in, and tension within the camp had reached a fever pitch. James Lawson moved with meticulous caution, every sound amplified in the still night, every shadow a potential threat. Yet his resolve never wavered. He had memorized guard rotations, noted the weak points in the fences, and calculated the exact moment when opportunity and risk would align. Conversations among the captors revealed fear in their voices, the Reich crumbling around them, and Lawson's hope surged quietly, unseen but fierce. He thought of the frozen fields, the rubble-strewn streets of liberated towns, and the faces of those he had fought beside, drawing courage from memories and the unbroken spirit of his fellow soldiers. At midnight he moved, silent as the shadows, blending instinct with preparation, each step calculated, every breath measured against the ticking of a war-weary clock. The prisoners around him stirred, but did not betray him. Some instinctively trusted, others too fearful to interfere, while Lawson's focus remained absolute. Breaking from the barracks, he navigated the camp with precision, avoiding detection, using darkness as both ally and shield, every heartbeat a drum of determination. At the outer fence he paused, listening to distant artillery and the muffled shouts of guards, knowing that this fence was the threshold between captivity and freedom. With one final glance toward the dormitories and the men he might inspire, he climbed, leaped, and vanished into the night, carrying not only his own life but the enduring proof that the human will could remain unbroken. By dawn, news of his escape rippled through the camp. Chaos ensued, confusion spread, and Lawson's solitary act had changed the balance, leaving captors scrambling and survivors inspired. This was a man who refused to break, whose courage in captivity became legend, proving that even in chains, the spirit could assert dominion over fear. By 8 May 1945, Europe erupted in celebration as Germany formally surrendered, ending the war that had consumed continents, cities, and millions of lives. James Lawson, now free from captivity, walked through the ruins of a continent. His body exhausted, his mind scarred, yet his spirit unbowed. Proof that endurance and courage could survive even the harshest trials. He paused in liberated towns, observing civilians emerging from shelters, soldiers embracing, and the slow, fragile return of normalcy, understanding that freedom was both a relief and a responsibility. Though the world celebrated, Lawson carried memories no parade could erase. The cold nights, the silent fears, the faces of comrades lost, and the hours spent plotting escape within walls of steel and fear. Every step he took reminded him that heroism was often silent, invisible to those outside the moment, and that courage was measured, not in medals but in choices, made when survival was uncertain. Returning to his homeland, he was greeted with admiration, yet he remained humble, aware that his defiance had not been for glory, but for life, for hope, for the unbroken spirit of humanity. Lawson's story spread quietly, told in letters, interviews, and whispered tales among soldiers and civilians, becoming a symbol of resilience, of the power of one individual to alter the course of events. Years later, he would reflect on that time in captivity, understanding that true strength lies not in what one can conquer externally, but in the steadfast refusal to yield internally. His legacy endured in every soldier who faced impossible odds, in every story of resilience, and in the collective memory of a war that demanded extraordinary courage from ordinary men. The world moved on, but Lawson's courage remained timeless, a reminder that even in the darkest hours, one person's determination could illuminate the path to freedom, and that the human spirit, when unbroken, could never be captured.